To David Bruno, the attorney, now is in our studio in New York with more analysis. So, as Benjamin says, that briefing, David told us a few important things. Obviously, that the suspect died at the scene, so there'll be no questioning of this suspect, and also that he was wearing what was described as a hoax explosive device on his body when they found him. But what overall big picture do you make of what we've learned today in London?
Well, what's good is that the risk has been ceased. And now it's on law enforcement. Law enforcement needs to find out who this individual is, where he lives, where he's been. They need to start searching these places to see if they could find forensic, electronic, any evidence to show who he's been in contact with, where he got this materials. And I do want to talk a little bit about that incident 2 years ago as well.
Yeah.
2 years ago, well, it wasn't June. It was June 3rd of 2017, where 8 victims were killed, 48 were injured. In that case, there were 3 perpetrators. They used a van, and they initially ran over people on the bridge, then spread out into the markets. And they, too, had those fake vests.
Yeah.
So that's a huge similarity that you could compare to that incident 2 years ago, where all 4 perpetrators, the 3 then and the 1 now, had a fake vest.
That's where we're hearing people use the term copycat in this particular attack versus, obviously what was known about that attack going in today. We also now know, I don't think it was any accident, that the gentleman that was sent out to brief reporters was not, the chief of police or a head of a department. He was the assistant commissioner for counterterrorism, Neil Basu. That we know that they're treating this not as a possible terrorist incident, but as a terrorist incident. Yeah. So what does that tell you? That they must have some information to act on, and
Correct.
What might that information be? I guess we just don't know.
Yeah, sure. They've been investigating this for a little while now. It was the vest, I'm sure, and they probably know who this individual was.
Right.
If this individual was on their radar before, I think that's probably evidence that why they came to a decision so quickly. I mean, they would not, under any circumstance, have come out and made a certain statement to the world at this point without some definitive evidence that this was, in fact, a terrorist incident. And that is what he did, in fact, say, that this is a terrorist incident.
Yep.
And that's the question that many had throughout the day as we hear these reports.
I agree.
So
I think that was surprisingly certain, because many times you hear, David, you hear these police officials in these situations, understandably, by the way, hedge and say, well, it could be terrorism. That's one of many possibilities we're looking into. But the assistant commissioner was definitive in his statement. So again, to your point, they must know even more than we know.
Yeah, sure. The coming days is going to be most important for this. Where did this individual come from? He had to come from somewhere. And if he had that fake vest, we know that he had to put it together somewhere. Where did the parts come? Where did he buy them? Let's get on that. And social media, we've already talked about this on this broadcast already, but nowadays when these individuals are on various different social media outlets, they do have a history and evidence that could be used to really put puzzle pieces together to figure out why and how and who else has been involved. So it's on police now to come up with all of these answers that all of us have.
I'm just looking at a tweet that's crossed from the White House press office, and Judd Deere there saying that President Trump, indeed, of course, just back from his trip to Afghanistan, he's at Mar-a-Lago in Florida. He's been briefed on the attack in London and is said to be monitoring the situation. The tweet statement from the press office goes on to say the U.S. strongly condemns all horrific acts of violence on innocent people, and we pledge our full support to our ally, the United Kingdom. But as we've pointed out a number of times, David, you have the President of the United States set to travel himself to London and land there, I believe, on Monday evening for the NATO summit. So, boy, the timing of this couldn't be any more sensitive, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I mean, we talk about Twitter. I actually saw a video from the bridge itself, and I know we haven't shown that here, but after looking at that video, it did show that police did have him subdued, and then at some point they started to retreat, and now we know why. It's because of the vest. They had him down. The weapon was out of his possession, and then all of a sudden everyone started to get off of him, and now we we know why. That's critical.
Two things that came out in that video. One is what you're pointing out, and the other is the involvement of the general public, that people were jumping in and trying to help. And imagine, as I said earlier, I guess the courage of those people doing so, knowing that he might have been wearing such a vest, and now he was, even if it was a hoax, that they, you know, as you said, the police probably figured that out as well. All right, David, thank you for coming on and rolling with the breaking news today. David Bruno joining us from here in New York. As Arthel, we continue to follow the happenings in London.